Hey everybody, this is Jim, and today we do our unit focused on transformational leadership. So we lead the general approaches of trait, behavioral, and skills, and now we get to specific leadership theories. And this first one is transformational leadership. So again, I won't go through all the slides, but I will give you kind of an overview and highlight some key things, and then I'll post the slides so that you can use them as you're working through Nordhaus preparing for the quiz and your discussions. So this unit here is going to focus on the comparison between transactional leadership, which focuses on the exchanges between leader and follower. We have this all the time where we work and get something in return, like a paycheck, or do work in a class and get a grade, to transformational, where you have a process where the leader is creating a connection with the followers to increase the motivation and the morality of both the leader and the follower. But this is as we put this leadership theory of transformational into our process model, this theory is not a step-by-step how-to be a transformational leader. Rather, it is describing what has taken place when the followers say that they've been significantly motivated or inspired or changed or transformed. So when the leader and the follower have been changed, motivated, have increased morality, not just morale, but morality, and there's been a change, then this describes how that change occurs. And it occurs when the leader exercised the behaviors of transformational leadership in various kinds of contexts. And then there are numerous outcomes that result. This is a very researched theory. So we go back to our definition. It is the process of creating this connection where the motivation and the morality of the leader and the follower are changed and increased, and the follower is able to achieve much more and accomplish much more and has been significantly inspired, and they attribute that to these behaviors in the leader. So here is our matrix where you can fill out and identify some of the leader behaviors. This is more of a follower-based approach in that if you want to know within an organization whether the leaders have been transformational, if you're evaluating a sorority or a fraternity or a company and saying, are the leaders transformational, you would go to the followers and say, have the followers been motivated and inspired and challenged and changed, and do they attribute it to these specific 4 leadership behaviors that are a part of transformational. The process again is when the leader exercises these 4 I's, the followers are changed. So let's jump in. In this chapter, Nordhaus spent some time talking about the relationship between transformational leadership and charisma. I'll let you read that and work through that. We won't go through that. Here is the first model that Bass put together in 1985 that showed the continuum of laissez-faire leadership, where the leaders are basically completely hands-off and not doing anything, to transactional, to transformational. So the next model, which was put together by Bass and Avolio, was a full range model that really talked about the full range of how leadership occurs. So we'll just highlight this a little bit so you can appreciate this model. Here is the laissez-faire, which this is where the leaders are very hands-off, and you may have been a part of an organization, a group that you've worked with, a company you've worked with, where the leaders were very passive and hands-off, and so this would be one level. And then you have this management by exception, both passive and active. Now, the management by exception is where I'm evaluating, critiquing, making recommendations, noting what a person is doing. So if you've had a leader that maybe followed you around on the job and made constant assessments, critiques, made sure you were hitting certain targets and goals. Sometimes that feels like they're a little bit too heavy, micromanaging. That is management by exception. There's a passive approach where the leader does nothing, and then all of a sudden you get a job evaluation and find out you weren't doing things right. Or the active approach where they're constantly following you and correcting. That then leads next to contingent reward, and this is where this is transactional at its purest form, the sense of which you work and accomplish things and the leader provides rewards. Now, this kind of leadership is fairly common. It goes on a lot in organizations. We need this kind of leadership, the give and take. And then at the highest level is the 4 I's. And what Bassan and Volio argued is that the more you're doing these 4 I's, the more active you are in them with frequency, the more transformational leadership is occurring. And those 4 I's are idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individualized consideration. So here then is now put together in a full model. You have basic transactional leadership going on that's a combination of this style, but then you have a performance that exceeds expectations. The followers have increased morality, increased motivation, they're accomplishing more, and they would attribute it to leaders that are operating with these 4 characteristics. So you should know these 4 characteristics. They are the 4 leader things, leader behaviors that go into your matrix. They're also the process by way of influence occurring. In the context, you have a transactional context, and yet the followers significantly achieve more and they're transformed. So this is the first of our approaches that's more as much follower-based as leader-based. And you're going to want to understand these 4 I's, and Nordhaus explains them pretty well. Idealized influence has to do with the leader as a significant model, and you're drawn to them, to imitate them, emulate them, you really appreciate them. This inspirational motivation is they inspire you and challenge you to go beyond expectations and set high goals and achieve more. Intellectual stimulation is where they challenge you to think creatively and think outside the box, think differently. And then the individual consideration is create an environment where they are individually caring for you. And again, you don't want to take this theory and say, oh, if I do those 4 I's, I'm a transformational leadership. What this theory is a description of when leadership is working and followers are more motivated and have higher morality and more is accomplished, you can look and say, okay, it might be occurring, and if it's occurring because of these 4 leadership behaviors, then that's transformational leadership. So you can see in the research, I'll put a slide in here which shows a considerable number of benefits to transformational leadership and situations where, for example, transformational leadership has been researched and where it's present, the followers have more satisfaction, more motivation, more performance. Transformational leadership in an organization is related to greater acceptance of jobs, satisfaction, increased performance. So it has a lot of positive effects when you have transformational leaders that are impacting followers in this way. There are some additional research that has gone on. Bennis and Nannis have identified 4 characteristics of organizations that have transformational leadership. This would be under the context in your theory matrix. This provides a context where transformational leadership can excel. Kuznets and Posner identified some practices of transformational leadership. This would be the closest thing to here's 5 things that a leader could do, and the followers might recognize them as transformational. But what's really interesting in transformational leadership is a lot of times the followers would attribute, they would say, I've been transformed or changed, and they would attribute to these 4 characteristics. But the leader might say something different. So, for example, I'll be doing a presentation on transformational leadership at Dr. Benjamin Mays. Dr. Mays was the mentor for Martin Luther King. Now, Dr. Mays saw himself as a servant leader. But in doing research on Dr. Mays, I was able to find a significant number of civil rights leaders that had been mentored by Dr. Mays. He was the president of Morehouse College and did a significant amount of mentoring leaders. When you read what those leaders wrote and listened to what they said, those leaders said that he provided an environment where he cared for them individually, where he challenged them in terms of their civil rights involvement and their pursuit of justice and planted seeds for the civil rights movement. He inspired them with high goals, high expectations, and pushed them beyond what they thought they were capable. And yet he himself lived that very example that he pushed them towards. And so he was aiming to be a servant leader, but the followers, as they achieved beyond what was expected of them and thought back upon Dr. Mays, they identified these characteristics. So he was, in fact, operating with transformational leadership, though he hadn't set out that way, but it was the followers that were able to affirm that. So again, later on in your case studies, when you're going to organizations and evaluating, is transformational leadership occurring, you start by asking the followers and evaluating, have they been motivated? Do they have increased morality? Have they been changed and inspired? And then asking, okay, is it these 4 behaviors of the leader that have caused that? So that is transformational leadership. Again, you'll have a discussion, a quiz by tomorrow night, a discussion post to interact with transformational leadership with each other within the class, and then a chance to reflect on it at the end of the unit. So as always, if you have questions, feel free to email me or text me. So otherwise, enjoy.